Well, a central theme in our FASD conference is the deep insight that can be gained from living experience. So this symposium taps into the powerful knowledge of the living experience of birth mothers who have raised children, youth, and adults with FASD. Each woman on this panel is lending their expertise to this symposium and will share not only their life experience, but also their knowledge and guidance for clinicians, researchers, other caregivers, self-advocates, and I hope policymakers. This symposium should provide a well-rounded set of views. This is because each of these women, Yolanda, Janelle, and Julie, come from different generations, have traveled their own life path, have been resilient in different ways, and because in their own careers, they have contributed to the field of FASD as educators, advocates, clinicians, and also policymakers. We aim for this symposium to feel supportive for both the presenters and participants. We wish this time to lead to understanding and clarity, not feelings that you, quote, cannot tell or ask, for both panel and audience. So here's our structure. Each speaker will present for about 15 minutes with a short grace period. I'll act as timekeeper in the interest of equity, even though I know everyone will have so much more to say. We ask there be no questions during the presentations, but your thoughts are important. Do write them down and save them, as we do plan to save a good amount of time for Q&A. At the end, we hope to have about 15 to 20 minutes of Q&A with the panel, although first we'll have a very short set of structured questions and answers, and then we'll open things up for the audience. We'll ask that you queue up at the microphones with one question and no more than one follow-up query. And again, I'll act as timekeeper for the audience. I'll be introducing each speaker one at a time. So we're going to start with Dr. Yolanda Ross, who is a woman in long-term recovery with 20 years of sobriety, who is a mother to an adult daughter living with FAS. As a social worker, Dr. Ross is deeply committed to supporting women and families in their journey of recovery from addiction and trauma while fostering a solid foundation for lasting success. Dr. Ross.
Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Before I begin, parts of my story is going to piss some people off. Parts of my story may bring you some things that you may find in your own practice or in your own lives, but my hope is that you take away from my story as a story of hope and resilience. So my name is Dr. Yolanda Ross. I'm a grateful recovered alcoholic and addict, and I'm the mother to a wonderful, beautiful 29-year-old daughter by the name of Hannah Simone Ross. My journey into addiction grew up in Houston, Texas. I am the youngest out of 4 children. Let me give you some context of my family dynamics. My father had his first child at the age of 16 in 1949. My mother had her first child at the age of 19 in 1954. My mother and father met in New Orleans, Louisiana, got married, and they had my middle sister in 1959. And here I come in 1970. So you see the big age gap, right? So growing up in a working class family, I didn't want for nothing. Growing up, I was an award-winning baton twirler. I was very talented. I was in gymnastics and everything, but I was teased as a young child because of my color and my thick hair. And I believe that I experienced some colorism within my own community. Fast forward into high school, I wanted to be a part of the cool kids, right? So I navigated toward the kids that were doing drugs and alcohol, and true enough, I became very popular because I was doing things that, you know, that was not very ladylike, my mother would say. I found myself getting addicted to alcohol, and I moved into the world of crack cocaine. Graduated from high school, went on to college, struggled in college, and my addiction took off. In and out of treatment in my late teens and early 20s. My mother and father, they did the best that they could, putting me into treatment facilities and being there very supportive of me. My mother was the type of woman where she didn't show love. She didn't express love like kissing you and hugging you, but she showed it by buying you things and, just basically, go to your dad, go to your dad. My father, on the other hand, was an individual who would love me and tell me that I believe in you. This is not how you was raised. We can get through this as a family. I ended up stealing a car. And I was charged with unauthorized use of motor vehicle back in 1993. I was 23 years old when I was on 3 years deferred adjudication, probation. Didn't do well on probation. And I had 10 months left on probation, and I was arrested for a blue warrant because I stopped going. And when I was arrested, I was sentenced to 2 years in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice. And while I was in jail, my father came and visited me, and I found I was pregnant for the first time in my life. 1996. And of course, my mother and my father visited me. I didn't have to want for nothing, ladies and gentlemen, because, I had commissary money. They would come visit me. I had the works. So when I got released, July of 1986, I told my mom and dad, this is it, I'm going to do well. And then I found myself drinking and drugging with my baby. When I relapsed while I was pregnant with Hannah, I remember the first time I relapsed, and I remember doing crack cocaine and drinking, and I remember my baby kicked me so hard. I called the ambulance. When I got to the hospital, the EMT drivers was telling the male nurse what I did, and the male nurse looked at me. He said, "You disgust me. You're horrible. I hope that they take your baby." I took the abuse because I wanted some help, right? But unfortunately, this became a reoccurrence. I would go out of relapse, go to the emergency room. I remember my sister, who was working at CPS at the time, said, if you come up positive, they're going to take your baby. So for the last 2 weeks of my pregnancy, I stayed clean for 2 weeks, and I gave birth to a 7-pound, 11.4-ounce baby girl named Hannah Simone. And I knew something was wrong because they immediately took her APGAR scores was very low. Mind you, my mother was right there when I gave birth to her, and my mother just started crying, and my mother just left me, and she followed Hannah to the NICU. She left me. Got home. Again, I didn't know anything about being a mother. My mother did everything. I didn't understand the cries. I didn't understand why she was crying this way. I didn't understand. And going back and forth to the pediatrician and all. And so what happened was that my mother was very patient with her, and my family was very patient. And I just remember, when, prior to giving birth to Hannah, I was in a treatment facility, and I remember a poster of a woman who said, this is what fetal alcohol syndrome looks like. So going back and forth to the pediatrician, they thought that Hannah had they excluded Down syndrome, probably autistic. And I remember asking the doctor, can you give me some information about fetal alcohol syndrome? She connected me with the University of Washington. They sent me this big package in the mail. I read the package, and I went back to a pediatrician. I said, I think Hannah has FAS. They did the diagnosis test on her, and she has FAS. So what does it look like? So again, ladies and gentlemen, I admit I did not stay clean and sober. I was in and out of jail, in and out of my addiction and all. It was my mother, my father, and my sister that took up the mantle to learn about FAS, getting her to physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, play therapy, massage therapy. They did everything for Hannah. Sadly, in 2001, I gave birth to a son who I gave up for adoption because I was in the midst of my addiction. And then, again, in and out of jail. on January 25th, 2005, I was contacted by the city of Houston that wanted to talk to me about a test that I had taken, and I was informed that I was HIV positive. Instead of getting help for my new diagnosis, I went back out and used, and I was arrested. This time I collected my third felony, and I did 7 months in jail. I remember being released after doing 7 months, and I told my father, this is it. I'm done. I'm going to do it right, Daddy. I've learned my lesson. And 3 days later, as I was back in the area of town where I did drugs, and I smoked up $1,000 worth of crack cocaine in 3 days, and I drank. I came home, body's twisting, mouth twisting. I was really, really bad off. And I remember my mother and father had all my things packed. Now, my biggest fear was not being HIV positive or going to jail. My biggest fear was being homeless. So I was able to find a treatment facility on a Sunday. And as my father was driving me to the treatment facility, he was talking to himself. And when we get to the treatment facility, my father literally fell into the arms of the counselor, Miss Deborah Ann Chisholm, and he said, I can't take this anymore. She is killing me. And that was my bottom. That was September 12, 2005, and I've been clean and sober ever since. Thank you. So what did I do? I got help for my HIV, right? Got on the right medication. I went back to school. Went to Houston Community College, got my associate's degree. Went on to the University of Houston, got my bachelor's of social work. Went on to the University of Houston, got my master's in social work. Went back to the University of Houston Clear Lake and got my master's in healthcare administration. And then I had the crazy idea to get my doctorate in social work, which is why I'm Dr. Yolanda Ross. I have made a purpose to work with women that struggle with the substance use issue and that was going through probation or criminal justice system, because I wanted to show my clients, if I can do it, you can do it. Now, in terms of raising a daughter, it was my mother, my father, my sister who taught me how to be a mother to a child with special needs. They taught me how to be patient with Hannah. Hannah's going to be able to do some things that you may not see other kids do. You cannot holler at Hannah. You have to talk things through. If you think she's lying, she's not really lying. You just have to really talk to her, get everything out of her. That way, you know she's not lying. My daughter Hannah has taught me how to love unconditionally. When Hannah was old enough, I told her about my struggles with alcohol and drugs. I told her the reason why the way you are is because Mommy was sick. And then Mommy struggled for a long, long time, but Mommy's better now. And my daughter, in all her wisdom, said, yeah, Mommy, you better now because you come home now. I come home to my daughter. And I have 5 minutes left. And I guess my biggest takeaway that I want to say to you is the biggest thing that I see with a lot of women that may have used while pregnancy is because of what their nurse may have said, right? Or what society says. Stigma is what keeps women from going to say, I used while pregnant. But if you open the door and say, no, I hear you, I support you, I'm here to help you, that could go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you, Yolanda. And you've actually, bless you, you've given the audience extra time for questions later, so thank you. I'll just introduce you from my chair, Julie, longtime friend. Julie Gila holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Human Resources and Business Management. She's also a certified medical assistant and accomplished 2.5 years of a Bachelor of Nursing degree. She completed her 46th year of recovery from alcoholism and drug addiction on January 1st, 2026. Her daughter Faith was born 2 days after she turned 18, and Faith was diagnosed with FAS at the age of 25. Julie?
All these years, I would stand up and I'd say, "Hi, my name is Julie, and I am an alcoholic." But I have a really good friend out here in the audience who for years, working with him and learning, about person-first language, he would say, Julie, you are so much more than your disease, than your disability. Don't do that anymore. So what I'm gonna say to you is, it has been 46 years, 3 months, 19 days, and 13 hours since I last took a drink of alcohol, last took an illicit drug. There has been 3 incidents or situations where I have used medications. One was when I had a total hysterectomy. One was when I completely ripped out my right shoulder, rotator cuff injuries. But believe me, those meds were all handled by the hospital and physicians. So I'm very, very careful when I have to do that. When I go home, the meds are handed straight off to my daughters, and they lock them up, and they're only dispensed per instructions. But as far as alcohol, which is my drug of choice, it has been 46 years, 3 months, 19 days, and now just about 14 hours since my last drink. So that would be how I would introduce myself as of today. One of the very first questions when we were talking about doing this panel, one of the very first questions that Joe asked us as birth mothers was how we would like to introduce ourselves. Would it be as a birth mom or as a birth mother? I really struggled with that. And I think Joe remembers it. I think Heather remembers it. I see myself as a mom. Right. As a mom. And part of that is because for many, many, many years, I was a foster mother. I was an adoptive mother. I was a guardian mother. Yes, I knew that I drank when I was pregnant with Faith. But I hadn't really put 2 and 2 together. I really tried hard to find a couple, 3 slides actually, on during the night and coming here today. I had 3 pictures that I wanted to put up today to show you why I think of myself as a mom first. Because every time I would come to the diagnostic clinic, I would come as a foster mom first. And I would go home after those clinic visits, and I would sit there and look at these foster children, and I would think, well, yeah, I drank a heck of a lot when I was pregnant with Faith. And really, the only thing different about Faith is that she has blonde hair and blue eyes. Whereas most of my foster children, my adopted children, are Native. And so at the age of 25, I asked Faith, I said, would you be interested, in going to the clinic with me and seeing if my drinking, had harmed you or made any difference? And she agreed. And when I left the clinic that day, I was the birth mother of a child with fetal alcohol syndrome. Now, by that point, I had already had about 17 years in recovery. I had worked my steps over and over and over. And I still can't tell you how ashamed, how guilty, how awful I felt when I sat down with her at the dinner table that night, and I said, Faith, I am so sorry. And I wouldn't blame you if you hated me. And my daughter looked at me and she said, Mom, why would I hate you? You didn't know any better. I'm just glad to know that I'm not stupid. But to go back to, the start of my drinking, I grew up in North Dakota. And if any of you know the rural, Midwest, back in the 50s, I'm 72, okay? And it was just the thing. I mean, at 2, I was drinking. I mean, we'd walk through the house, Dad would have an open bottle of beer, we'd just drink, okay? That was just the way it was. The first time I remember being probably kind of intoxicated, I was 7. My first blackout, I was 11. That was actually the only time I remember blacking out. I had a doggone good tolerance. And as far as my drinking goes, or my substance use goes, I really never got into a lot of other substances. I've never smoked marijuana, ever. Never used cocaine. Never used, crack or any of those other things. And I'm only saying that to show you the differences that there are between the populations of birth mothers and birth women. Not that there's one that's better than the other, not that there's one, it's just that there's differences between us, okay? And now maybe it's geographical in area, I don't know. Maybe it's generational, I don't know. I mean, I am the oldest, I think, of the 3 of us that are up here. I was probably the most rural in some ways, maybe. But again, it's not because one of us is better or but we're different. And I think that's something to bear in mind as professionals, as scientists, as other things. We're different. Just like our children are different, just like the families are different. There's a spectrum of children, there's a spectrum of families, there's a spectrum of birth moms. I remember going to a conference. I don't even remember when it was, but it was along the lines of this type of a conference. There was researchers, scientists, there was professionals, there was parents and caregivers. And I was sitting in the audience, and there were 2 very well-known researchers that were presenting a paper. And, I think that their focus was kind of on, could they find the risk factors in birth mothers? Because I think they thought if they could find the risk factors for birth mothers, then they could hone in on primary prevention, okay? Because then they could figure out what those women were or who they were. Well, then they could offer them supports and interventions, and we could prevent FAS. So they're up there on the stage, and they've got all these wonderful charts, right? And I'm sitting there in the audience, and in essence, what they were saying was the high-risk factors for birth mothers included women who were late in their reproductive years, women who had already given birth to multiple children, okay? Women who already had children, at least one child, who had already been diagnosed with an FASD. Women of color. Women who had multiple sexual partners. Women who had voluntary abortions. Women who lived in poverty. Women of definite lower socioeconomic status. women who did not graduate from high school. But I mean, do you see where I'm going with all that? Okay? And I sat there and listened to these, like I said, very well-known, very well thought of doctors, male doctors. I finally couldn't take it anymore. And I stood up in my seat and I said, "Excuse me." And I introduced myself. And at that point, I was the family advocate at the University of Washington Diagnostic and Prevention Network. So I had Dr. Claren behind me, and I had Dr. Astley Hemingway behind me, and I had a bunch of other of my colleagues behind me. And I heard them kind of clearing their throats. And I said, "I got to talk to you." I said, "I am the birth mother of a daughter with fetal alcohol syndrome." And I said, "If you went solely based on your risk factors, you would have missed me. And you would have missed just about every birth mother I know." I said, "So take your blinders off. You got to get over this stuff, folks. You really do. We're not just those women." All right? I also want two final really quick comments. I really asked myself seriously why I was even coming here. I felt like I don't know that I even belong in this field anymore. I mean, I've been out of it for a long time. I wasn't sure what I have to contribute anymore. I thought, God, does anybody even know I'm part of this anymore? Does anybody even know I'm around? Two beautiful young women last night at the planning committee said to me as I was going out the door, "You're a legend." Do you know how good that made me feel, ladies? That made me feel so good. Made me feel wonderful. That maybe I am still remembered. So, I just want to tell you guys thank you for having me. Thank you for hearing us as birth parents. Thank you. And thank you all for coming.
May I introduce you? Thank you. I need a roll. Janelle. With over 30 years of experience, Janelle McMillan is a knowledge keeper, trauma therapist, and educator dedicated to Indigenous nations. From Vancouver's downtown east side to international stages, Janelle has developed university curricula and served on the Métis Family Services Board. Currently a culture and language teacher, she is a proud mother, grandmother, and long-time traveler of the Red Road. Janelle.
So I think where I start will lead to where we're going. I just want to say that one of the first things that I would like to do is I'd like to challenge the stigma and to be able to move beyond blame. I know that we all have our journeys and we all get to where we are because we're meant to get there and we're meant to go there. And everybody's path is different. And sometimes it's really hard to accept the path that we have to walk. And sometimes the lessons we learn on our path are extremely hard to learn. I want to say with FASD, there are only victims, right? Whether you are a birth mother, whether you are a grandparent, whether you are a community member, whether you are one of our children, nobody is unscarred. Nobody is untouched. And having said that, I also want to say and validate that every one of us has had a journey, and that journey is what we've come here to learn. So in our culture, one of the hardest things to accept is that we are walking the walk, we are learning the lessons that we agreed with the Creator before we left. So before we chose our mother, before we chose our father, we already knew what our path was going to look like. And guess what? We came anyway. So it's that, it's part of that grieving process, I think, for myself as well, and finding my sobriety, and understanding that if I chose this path, and if I chose this for my children, and if they chose me, then how can we learn from this? How can we grow from this? How can we heal from this? I want to acknowledge that childhood trauma. When I think of everybody that I know that has had addiction issues, our roots come from trauma. And when there isn't access and availability to healing, we look for ways to self-medicate. We look for ways to not be present. And I think that sometimes people forget, especially in the medical profession, people forget that the people that are in front of you are surviving. Every single day, they are coping the only way they know how. So until somebody gives them the strength, the courage, the connection to, telling us that, you know what, like things may have been bad, but we're also here to help you. The very few times in my life that I heard from a professional, we're here to help you, I can count on my fingers. 3 times, 3 professionals. When I was young and I was drinking, and before I got pregnant, my doctor that I had at the time said, "You don't need to see a psychiatrist. You just need to be able to make friends, and your life will be fine." I didn't get any support. I didn't get any counseling. I was drinking, and I had been drinking for a long time. When I was 9 years old, my friends said to me, and my friends were always older, they said, if you can't cope with what's happening at home, you should smoke. Smoking takes away the pain. Smoking makes you forget all the stuff that's happening to you. And so I started smoking. Well, by 10 years old, it wasn't helping. And how was I getting my cigarettes? I was taking them, right? I wasn't a good kid, right? I was surviving. I was trying anything and everything to be able to be present in my world. Then my friend said, "You know what? We found something better. If that doesn't work, you should try alcohol, because alcohol is even better than tobacco." So I tried alcohol. And you know what? Alcohol was great, right? It made you go into a different world completely, where you didn't have to think, you didn't have to feel, and you didn't have to remember, and you didn't have to be present when terrible things were happening to you. When that only lasted for a while before that no longer worked, you needed more. And if you think that there are not bootleggers for 10-year-olds, you are wrong. I had bootleggers. I had a lot of bootleggers, a lot of places where I could go and get alcohol for me. I look back on that now, and I look back on my grandchildren, I think, who in their right mind would have done what people were doing when I was that young? And it's shocking to me to look back. And it's really important for me to continue to look forward so that people realize that that's not a good thing to do. By the time I was 12, my friend said, "Well, we see that hasn't worked effectively. Why don't you try pills?" So I was introduced to pills. Pills were great. You could numb yourself completely. You could go to dimensions that nobody else would be in. It was wonderful, but you were not inside your body and you were at risk, and there was much more harm happening to you while you were out of body. My story's not unique. There are so many people that I know that this has been their experience from very young ages. And really, we are just trying to survive. We're just trying to get through the next day, the next minute, the next hour. And I believe that we need to start recognizing use as a symptom. It's not what you're trying to cure. If you keep trying to cure the alcoholism, the drug addiction, if you keep trying to cure those things, you're not going to move a lot of people through to their healing places. What's before the substance use? What's before survival? And so I really encourage you that if you see somebody that is acknowledging that they are drinking or using drugs, that it is a symptom of something deeper. And if we could go there, because I went to all kinds of programs and counseling, and what really worked for me was being reconnected through culture. And for my elders to say, you know, if you keep on this path, you're not going to survive. But if you choose this path and you walk back in the cultural ways, and then I started going to ceremony, and I started getting healed for the first time. I mean, I'd been in counseling for 19, 20 years, and it wasn't working. I kept talking about the trauma over and over, and every time I relived the trauma, I was again going through as if it had just happened again. Each new therapist start at the beginning, tell us everything that happened over and over and over, and I kept reliving it and bringing it back up. It was never allowed to go anywhere safe. So from my experience, I learned that we need to heal the trauma, and what happened to us is just what happened to us. It's not who we are. It doesn't define us. It is just what happened. And it's not what happens to us that matters. It's what we do about it. And I think that that's a really important thing. Stigma is a barrier. When I went to my doctor when I was pregnant, I swore up and down I was pregnant. My doctor kept telling me I wasn't. And for some weird reason, they would do blood tests, and my blood tests came back negative. And what's odd is my blood tests continued in future pregnancies, all came back negative till I was over 3 months. And it was bizarre. And everyone kept saying, oh, it's the labs that are making mistakes. Well, I was in Prince George the first time, I was in Vancouver the second time, and I was in Kamloops the third time. How is it that 3 labs in 3 different places could be so wrong? I don't know. Maybe they mixed up samples, maybe they mixed up names, I don't know, but 3 places did it. But when I went to my doctor, after we finally confirmed that, yes, I was pregnant, and he said, well, you don't drink enough. You're right, I don't drink enough. You know, if you're allowed 1 drink, how big is that 1 drink? Because if you tell me I can have 1 drink, I'm having a pitcher. Correct. Right? I am not having your measured 1 ounce or however much little amount you put in a cup. I am having almost straight, and I am going to drink it. And that was my pattern. My pattern was anytime I was emotionally set off, I would drink, and I would be, you know, recovering for the next few days, getting all the alcohol back out of my system. And then I wouldn't drink again. I would go weeks, months without drinking. But as soon as I was stressed, I would drink heavily. So my patterns were like that, and I kept my patterns like that right up until the day that I quit. And I had always said that I wouldn't be the parent that my parents were to me. And I didn't have a lot of support. I left at 15, and when my middle child was about 18 months old, they were waiting for me, and I was hungover. I didn't want to get up. I'd been out with my friends the night before. It was April Fool's Day, and my little one peed all over the walls in the bathroom. I was livid. And I did what I swore I would never, ever do. I backhanded my child. That was my bottom. I never wanted to become my parents. I always wanted to have a better life for my kids, and that's why I left home, and that's why I kept trying to make a place for them. But that was my moment. That was my, this is what caused that, and it will never happen again. When I think of birth moms, how do I go for help? How do I say that I've just done this and expect that I'm going to get the help that I need without them destroying everything? But I did go for help, and I was told, you just need to go to, get this, Nobody's Perfect parenting program. Well, Nobody's Perfect parenting program did not give me the skills to work with my children that had neurodiversities. I was sent to the Brenson Family Program. And the Brenson Family Program said, well, if you just consistently applied the skills we're teaching you, you would successfully complete this program and your children will be great. Can you bring somebody into my house? Because when my children are doing this, when I'm waking up to a knife at my throat from my 3 or 4-year-old, can you tell me how I'm supposed to react or respond to that? Can you have somebody come into my house and show me what I need to know or what I need to do? Oh no, we don't do that. We don't have programs like that. I created a program like that when I worked at the Friendship Center because I thought, I can't be the only mom that needs this. And I think that doctors also need to, like not just doctors, but scientists, everybody in the field of working with people need to prioritize lived experience. If you could hear what we're really saying, you could help a lot of people. But oftentimes it's top down instead of let's talk equally, you know. And I like that about our circle teachings because nobody is above and nobody is below. We are all in this together. So let's be in it together. Let's heal together. Let's learn together. Let's change together. Let's be there for one another. I think we need to allow space to hear the realities of birth moms, to be able to hear what brought us to the places that we were brought, and how, if we're going to do prevention work, how do we prevent that from happening to the next generation? How do we prevent those things from happening so that there isn't that step-up process? And let's focus on our strengths, right? I have my own share of deficits. I could list those off so much easier than I could ever tell you what my strengths are. But I really think that we need to look at our strengths. We need to look at what do we do well and what do we have to offer? How do we move forward? And coping is survival. Just remember that. Coping is survival. So when you have somebody that's barely surviving, when they walk into your space, they are asking you for help. So give them a lifeline. Tell them, no matter what you choose, I will be there walking alongside of you. I will be there. So that we have hope, and that creates our resilience to continue moving forward. So thank you.
So we're going to just take a brief moment to give Yolanda and Janelle a question each to add just a bit more information. And Yolanda, I feel like my timekeeping, it is my job, but it did sort of interrupt the flow there. So we had a question, but I also had to just tell you to feel free if you want to just ignore the question. And add in any information you feel like you didn't have a chance to say. The question was about the process of recovery being complicated and what you wanted the audience to know about recovery, but feel free to hold forth on anything you think is important.
So the process of recovery being complicated, I think for me, if you do not have a solid foundation of a solid support system, it could be complicated, right? For me, getting clean and sober, it involved me going to a treatment facility for 3 months. For me, it was getting a sponsor, working the 12 steps of recovery, and really working the steps, getting to the ounce of be true. For me, was finding No Fast at that time and connecting with an awesome, beautiful woman by the name of Kathy Mitchell, who connected me with the Circle of Hope, in which I was able to bridge friendships throughout the years, Julie and Jolene, and to this day, every Wednesday we show up for our Circle of Hope support system. We do a meeting and everything. For me, there was a point in my recovery in which I too, Julie, I was put on some medication, right? And I was doubting my sobriety. I was doubting because I'm on, it was tramadol. And the way my doctor said tramadol, he said, oh, this is the weakest opiates. But I had people in the meetings, it's like, if you take any mood-altering substance, you have relapsed. And I remember I was doubting my sobriety, right? And so I remember calling on Jolene, and I was like crying and everything. And she was like, well, Yolanda, if you may have to change your sobriety. I said, I'm not doing that. I'm not throwing away 20 years of sobriety. But it took me doing like Julie, giving my medication to my sister, and she dispensing how much I'm supposed to take every 6 hours. So complicated meanings that, for me, just finding women like me that struggle with the substance use issue and really working the program and really get gut level honest. This is how I feel. Yes, I want to use today, but I can't, because if I use, I had a counselor say, Yolanda, I want you to play the whole tape through. Play the whole tape through. If you use it and everything, then what happens? Oh my God, I'll be back in Sunnyside. I would be back, pawning up my car. I'll drain my credit cards. I'll drain my bank account. I'll drain my 401k. Oh my God, my sister and my daughter out there looking for me. No, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. So I hope that's answered your question about recovery for me. Yeah.
Complex, sensitive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Julie.
Can I make a little comment?
Sure.
Do you know how sneaky this shit is? Sorry. Sorry. Just last night at the planning dinner, I was sitting there, and we were asking those questions and stuff, and I kept kind of losing concentration. And, we had eaten dinner, and I had gotten a glass of the iced tea, and it was in one of those tumbler glasses. And I kept thinking, I can't concentrate. And I kept looking at this glass and looking at this glass, and it dawned on me, it looked like a glass of bourbon. And I had to ask the gentleman sitting at the table, would you mind taking this glass away from the table? And he did. He took it off the table, and he put it over on another one of the serving trays. Because, I've got 46 plus years of recovery. And I wasn't a bourbon drinker. But it was this glass sitting there that looked like a glass of bourbon. And I had to have him take it off my table for me. That's how sneaky this stuff is. So.
Whew. Janelle. You wanted to put this question out as a possible one to answer, and then, audience, it's your turn. What is one thing each of us can start doing tomorrow, either in our jobs or our personal lives, to help change the narrative and end the stigma birth mothers face?
So I think that one of the answers may lie in leveraging potential. see the potential in the person in front of you. And I'm going to give credit to my dearest friend, once Dr. Locke, who saw the potential in me and my family. She was the first person to ever say, "It's not your parenting, there's something else going on here." And that is when we were able to get diagnosis for 2 of my children. And it helped to explain why doing everything that I thought I was supposed to be doing wasn't working. The giving hope that things are going to work out is immeasurable. We need hope. Even if it takes us, 10,000 times to fall down, we need hope that there's somebody there to offer their hand so that we can stand back up. And it's not always the same people that are extending their hands, but somebody is extending their hands. She said that she would be here for us. 30 plus years later, she is still here for us. When we struggle and we have our grandchildren and next generation coming, and we still reach out, I feel probably closer to her than I ever did to my mom. And for that, I give good thanks, because I needed that. I needed somebody in my corner that wasn't there, that couldn't be there. And it's not because my birth mom didn't want to be there. It's my birth mother didn't have what she needed to have. Her basket was empty, and along came me. So it wasn't that there weren't people that could have been there. They just weren't able to be there. And it makes a big difference. And I know that not every clinician, like even as a therapist myself, I have not been able to be there for 30 years for the people that I work with. But there are people that still, out of the blue, I've never changed my phone number since I started doing the work that I did in the downtown east side. And I will get phone calls out of the blue, and I will reconnect, and I will be there for those people, because I was taught by a most beautiful special teacher, and I give you thanks. So if you can be that light for somebody, or share those messages to be so that somebody can be the light, leverage their potential, because words matter, and they either make or break you. So give us the words that make us, don't break us. So, thank you.